Yes. Hey. Okay, so for the rest of today, we're gonna basically just take like a step towards application. So if what we've talked about so far is a bit more like education or philosophical, what's a profit and loss, what's a balance sheet, how do they differentiate from themselves, what's a personal financial statement, what's the point of all of them, and what I'm calling 201, we're going to transition to some examples of if you are thinking about money differently, what might it impact? So some examples of how you would act differently if your thinking has changed, okay? And I'm going to try to leave a good amount of room for questions at the end. And so that you know where we're going tomorrow, what I'm always tempted to end up talking about in this section is investing in real estate. Because like if there's an action item after creating the PFS that I can give to all of you, it's that you should be investing in real estate. And I don't like to put that sort of a should on someone, but I think it's actually true, probably. I'm going to try to avoid talking about that, and it might seem like an obvious, like, you should be talking about investing in real estate here because I've given it an entire big chunk of time tomorrow. So the first half of tomorrow is designed to help you better understand real estate investment, both for your clients, but also I think maybe more importantly for you over the course of the rest of your life and how you manage your net worth. So we might hit on real estate a little bit, but I'm intentionally avoiding that as an example in some of these cases because we'll spend a bunch of time on that tomorrow. So you can think about that as like, it's the last big example that we'll talk about for a while tomorrow. We'll hit the other smaller ones now, okay? Talk about thinking like a business owner instead of a salesperson. That's the goal here. Thinking about investment rather than expense. Expense is something that hits a profit loss. An expense is something that is in that category of thinking about money over certain periods of time. An expense is a part of a budget, right? Expenses are realities. I'm not saying all that's fake. I'm saying thinking about money going out the door as only expense is limiting your thinking. Think about money as an investment rather than expense. That's the first thing we're going to talk about. Second thing is we're going to set a goal for net worth rather than income. My hunch is that this is going to be one of the action items for a number of you. We'll talk about the why. Why set a goal for net worth, and why is that more important or kind of more advanced thinking than setting a goal for income? I'm not anti-setting goals for income. We'll talk about that. And then a tax strategy. So these three things, outside of investing in real estate, I think are the best examples that I have for you of what this shift in thinking will do for you as a business owner. Okay? Investment over expense, net worth over income, and tax strategy. Try to circle back to this a couple times. Don't be intimidated. Don't worry about whatever the lack of knowledge you have is. Just look at it this way. Every business owner in the world, even the most successful, at some point in time, they understood zero of this. Right? You can't point me to a human being who is brilliant in business that just always got it. No, they didn't. No 5-year-old gets this. Definitely not my kids. Okay, investment over expense. Give me some examples of expenses particular to our industry. What are some things that in our industry are expenses for realtors?
Just have a LIBOR fee for technology.
I just paid the $400 non-refundable application fee.
Yeah.
Postage, good. Stamps, LIBOR, tech fee, stamps, good.
$1,500 yesterday.
Signs, yep. Gas, yep. Cell phone, good. Okay.
Alcohol.
I have a few of them on there, good. Okay,
Yeah, that's a good way to put that.
there we go. Give me some examples of investments, and I'm specific to being a realtor. So don't tell me buy investment real estate or buying stocks, buying shares in a small business. What are things that realtors do with their money that are investments? Who said that?
Is he getting the right client care?
Sarah Beth just heads up in case.
No, it's me. She really must have done this.
Okay, good. Jackson said client care. What else?
CD.
Like your admin?
CD. Yes. Inman in Vegas.
I was gonna say Vegas, baby. Vegas is an investment.
Your admin?
Yes. Crystal said admin.
But I didn't.
No, please. I know, because client care was the one that I was like.
It's fine.
Prospecting, like if I am in another city looking for clients or real estate things for them.
Yeah.
Farming.
Yep. I gave Amy Porter a little shout out here. The way that these things hit your financial statement, it doesn't really matter. Like, you don't necessarily have to track these things differently. I'm not having an accounting conversation here. I want to have a conversation about how this shifts your thinking about money. And let me give you an example here. I came from a different industry that I worked in for a few years before getting into real estate, and I don't know, I enjoy economics and I like learning about different industries and business. It's just an interest of mine. It's what I studied in college, and so I like reading about the differences in what industries spend and invest. And getting into real estate, I found it so interesting that there are all of these small businesses, that's what realtors are, making really good money and super hesitant to spend any. They basically would spend, I don't mean they're hesitant, realtors will spend money. I mean on their business, is what I mean. Sorry, thank you for the fair there. They're very hesitant to spend money on their business, and what I learned was that the majority of what realtors are spending money on in their business are in the expense category. And the basic premise of the two is that expenses, you don't really have a choice. You can't do business without paying the LIBOR tech fee. You gotta put gas in your car. Good luck doing it without a cell phone, right? Those are expenses. There's cost of doing business. You don't have to do any of these, right? Yes, they're expenses. You can write them off. You categorize them as expenses. My point is they're different. And my experience was, as small businesses, just about any other industry that I know of, businesses are more willing to think about money as a tool, as an investment. So I don't want to necessarily have a ton of conversation about you as a realtor investing money into certain things and how effective is it. That's kind of a conversation for another day. But do you see how thinking about the money differently shapes your thinking? And I will at least want you to acknowledge that you are in an industry that has some kind of predisposition to expenses only. And don't think about investment of dollars. And I think it limits us. It really does. I think it limits not just the amount of money that you can make, maybe that's what it limits. I think maybe for a lot of realtors, it limits their quality of life. Because they are in a concept of, I can produce money off of my time, and I'm not gonna think about how to invest money, right? And therefore, I've got one formula. The more time I contribute, the more money I make, and that might drive you crazy eventually. You're gonna make good money. And so here's a concept of like rethinking the money. I'll go to this next one. One of the so both of these hit your profit and loss, but an investment has infinite spending potential if it is invested wisely and it is spent with an eye to your balance sheet. I've got a little bit there, but why does an investment have infinite spending potential?
There's growth potential.
Somebody said growth potential? Right. In a given moment, you can't invest an infinite amount of money. But if it has an ROI, it's positive, if it's returning to you positive, over a long period of time, it has an infinite potential because it's actually creating money, right? It's not costing money, it's creating. This is a realtor here. I remember this was a little over a year ago. I was having this conversation. It was our third or fourth conversation in helping him think about how to grow his business. He had had 3 years in a row that were like strikingly similar production levels. Like this never happens. It was like almost identical 3 years in a row. And he was running a good business, making good money, enjoyed his work. But he was like, why am I stuck? And so we were going through that in 3 conversations, and he asked me about client care, and we were talking about that. And he said, what should my budget for client care be? I was like, you're gonna get annoyed with me with the answer, and I said, it's the wrong question. I think the question is, how many dollars can I productively invest into client care? Because if I can productively invest it in client care, why set a budget on that? Now, you have to have the dollar sitting in a checking account somewhere. I get it. We're up in the clouds, okay? But you see the difference. I wanted to get him to think about client care as an investment with infinite spending potential, if invested wisely, spent with an eye to the balance sheet. Expenses, not really spent with an eye to the balance sheet. It's just a necessity of doing business. Investment is thinking about how can I leverage what I have to increase my net worth. Now, you might be thinking, well, okay, what if I spent $100,000 a year in client care and it generated a ton of business? Didn't I just like make myself work harder? You can effectively invest $100,000 a year in client care. You could also go find some really great young realtors to be buyer's agents and hire an admin. I mean, like, way easier said than done. But you see what I'm saying? If you're thinking about money as an investment, now all of a sudden you've opened the door to a number of different solutions. Because it's no longer solely relying on your time. Now, I'm giving examples that are specific to being a realtor. I actually, it's the mentality that I want you to understand. You might, I know, I could name in our company and other companies, I know quite a few realtors that have never developed a habit of investing money in their realtor business. They do a lot of business, they pay the expenses they have to pay, they don't really invest money in their realtor business. Totally fine. I don't really have a dog in that fight. So long as they're expanding their financial literacy to think about money as something that can be invested, and they're doing it somewhere. You could say, I've figured out how to sell $4 million of real estate a year to a fantastic clientele, and I have no interest in trying to expand or leverage anything there. I'm just going to make it as enjoyable as I can. Fantastic. Then what? And are you thinking about the money as a vehicle that can be invested to impact your net worth? If you are, then fantastic. I know a lot of realtors that I look at and I say, oh my gosh, if you would open the door to investing in real estate, I know I said I would use it as an example, but if you would open the door to investing in real estate, you would feel so much less pressure in how hard you have to work every given year in selling real estate. That is an odd thing for the owner of a brokerage to say to their realtors, but I think it's a value of ours. We want people to be successful in the way they want to be successful. And if that means selling a little bit of real estate and being really smart with money, then fantastic. And if we can help you do that, then great. So it's not so much about, we're not having a conversation here like, are you doing these things? That's a different conversation. It's trying to give you examples relevant to your industry in terms of how the different way of thinking would impact a specific small business that you're all in. Client care, I think, being the easiest one, in my opinion. I'm going to hit pause here before I transition from talking about investment rather than expense. Questions? If y'all haven't started following Frank Stop, won't stop. Go ahead.
If anyone wants to take over the admin of that too, please.
They look an awful lot alike. An investment is thinking about your balance sheet. An expense is not. Can't avoid the expenses. They're real. You could actually argue that you might work tech fees and investments because it's a necessary investment. There's no strategy to that. You have to do it. Okay. Intentionally saves tax strategy to last because it's the most fun. Okay. If somebody walks up to you on the streets, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a realtor. And they, for whatever reason, decided to just go ahead and ask you this. Oh, what's your goal?
People ask me that all the time.
Well, again, we care more about what we sell to consumers do. I guarantee you that. How, in our industry, how do we typically answer this?
Giving great service, building my clientele.
We
Are
normally
we
answer
talking
that.
about-
Come on.
Am I
We
talking to a
normally
client?
answer in volume.
Yeah.
How much we're gonna sell.
I think in most industries, the understanding of setting goals surrounding income, which in a sales industry is going to be directly tied to how much you sell, is a common practice. And I want to emphasize I'm not anti-setting sales and income goals. But most of the time, we are calibrated to think about financial goals in the context of income. So this could be, I want to make $100,000, I want to sell 10 million, and they're worthwhile. They can keep you accountable, they can motivate you, they can help you you develop a business plan, like, income goals are worth it. I want you to walk out by the end of tomorrow with a net worth goal. Some of you already have one. If you already have one, this does not count as one of your 2 action items. If you don't, you're in luck, because then a personal financial statement and your net worth goal might be your 2 action items. I won't stop you at 2, but a net worth goal understands money as an asset with a lifetime view, helps us understand how our work relates to retirement. Somebody said that earlier, I forget who that was, it was a good point. Brings clarity to the why behind our income or sales goals. A net worth goal doesn't eliminate the value of setting a goal for a make 100 grand or sell 10 million. I think it actually brings clarity and strategy to them. So it's no longer just, Tanya, I'm just gonna pick on you. Tanya set her goals for $100,000 a year. She didn't actually say that. Most of the time, if I were to say to Tanya, why 100?
Well, is that will help me pay my bills and I'll be comfortable, is what most people would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even that strategic, and they would say, I don't, because I made 85 last year.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make more, or well, that person made 100 and they're an idiot.
Yeah.
Hey.
I could be, if they could do
Tell
it.
me none of you set a goal. Yeah, you can be lying. Having a net worth goal allows you to strategically back into income goals. And I think actually provides much more meaningful understanding of why the income goal matters. I think it also brings some freedom to quality of life calculations and how those intersect with income. Your net worth goal. How much caffeine does everybody has? Because it's going to get a little bit math formula heavy here, but stay with me. First question you have to answer. At what age do you want to work only because you want to? Okay.
Sit down, I can't.
There's the ideal and then there's the reality. So I'm not saying retire. I think retirement as a concept is actually like disappearing. And I kind of like that. I think human beings are realizing that what we've thought about as retirement may not actually be all that healthy for most of us. It's a get to a point in life where you're not grinding and work because you have to. That you're working like, what is the day in your life? My mentor in Lafayette, guys, I was 24 years old making $17,000 a year. And he was like, what birthday? What birthday? Do you want to only work because you want to? And I was like, what? So but he made me lay it out on a spreadsheet. That spreadsheet has changed a bunch of times since then, but I don't know that I would have that spreadsheet today if he hadn't made me do it. So that was the starting point. What day in your life, very specifically, do you want to be working only because you want to? That's the first question. I don't even care what the answer is as long as you answer. If you say it's 35, I say fantastic. How are you going to do it? If you say 70, I say great. Actually, I'm not pushed back a little bit. Okay, so the second question you have to answer. How much money, adjusted for inflation, do you think you will need per year to live on at that time for the rest of your life? So the second question you have to answer is, you know what standard of living you're comfortable with. And you have to try to calculate what's it going to cost to live at that standard of living at this stage. So for me, my answer to question 1 is 50. I then have to calculate cost me to maintain whatever standard of living I want from that point on for the rest of my life. And I'm gonna give you some examples of this and how we run this calculation. You're gonna realize precision is not realistic, but you have to start somewhere. Third question, at what percentage rate do you think you can generate passive income from your net worth? So what I mean by that is if you're worth, say your net worth is $1 million, do you think you could generate 8% of wealth off of that million every year without working a 9-to-5 job? That's what I mean by passive. So this could be stocks, it could be your 401k, it could be investment real estate, it could be interest you have in the business. But how much can your net worth work for you in a way that you have to manage it, but it's not relying on your day-to-day time? You have to have answers to all three of these questions to have a net worth goal that has any real meaning. You could tell me you want to be worth $10 million because the number sounds good, but the goal is kind of meaningless if you're not also thinking about what age are you when that happens, how much money do you need to live on per year, and at what percentage rate do you think you can generate passive income off of your net worth? I'm going to give you some ranges to think about, some things to think about, but you have to know all three of these numbers. Okay? Just said that. Okay, here's an example. You are currently 45. You want to be able to stop working when you are 55. I don't care if you stop working or not. It has nothing to do with it. You want to be able to. 55. You need $100,000 per year right now to maintain your desired standard of living, and you're happy with your standard of living, and you don't think you're ever going to need to change it. Well, 10 years from now, at 5% inflation, and we can talk about this, this is all of a sudden a really hard calculation to make, because we are very clearly in the middle of significant inflation. Who the heck knows what rate it's going to turn out to be and how long it's going to last, but we're definitely in a period of inflation right now. Like, name me something that's not becoming more expensive. That's inflation. So calculating this right now is tricky, but again, precision, it's a myth. You have to start somewhere. What I'm doing here is inflation at 5% a year for the next 10 years. That would be higher than normal. Normal inflation is 2 or 3% a year. I don't know if 5% is the number. What you're going to end up doing with this document is looking at it every single year. If you look at it every single year, if your inflation calculation was off, what you're eventually going to realize is, I can't maintain my standard of living at $180,000. That's the wrong number. But you're going to know that over time and be able to adjust it every year. So if it's 100 now and you want to retire in 10 years and inflation was 5% between now and then, it means that when you're 55, it's going to cost you 180 to have the same standard of living that 100 would buy you now. And I can help you with any of these calculations. I just want you to get the concept right now, okay? You believe your net worth can passively produce 8% ROI per year. I'm using 8% here, return on investment, is ROI. I'm using 8% because the stock market, over a long enough period of time on average, has typically returned at about an 8%. Obviously there's stretches where it goes way down and goes way up, but if you zoom out enough, or you invest in more conservative, low-risk stuff, it tends to average 8. Investment real estate, it may not be at a given moment what stuff is trading at, but 8 is a pretty standard ROI in investment real estate. We'll talk about stocks compared to real estate later, because because that 8% doesn't account for some things in real estate. But it's a number that people would often use, this calculation. If you show me your net worth goal, and in that goal, you say, I need $200,000 a year. I think by the time I retire, I think I'm gonna need $200,000 a year. And I think I could do that if I was worth $1 million. My net worth was $1 million. I don't even like that phrase, by the way, worth $1 million, but that's just the common phrase. If I was worth $1 million, I could generate 200 grand a year. If you're able to generate 20% passively off of your net worth a year and do that consistently, you're beating Warren Buffett. So no, you can't. Sorry. But my point is, you have to determine these three numbers and then be able to play with them. And I'm not, hopefully what I said didn't just make anyone feel stupid, because that wasn't my goal. But you see that in setting the first two, you might then realize like, oh, that's going to assume that my wealth can generate 20% passively. I should ask somebody if that's realistic. You ask somebody and they're like, no, it's not. Do not project that. Low single digits is actually probably a more like safe projection. High single digits is probably more realistic. What is different about this? I'm fishing for a specific answer, but there's other answers too. How do we normally think about retirement financially? There's two things that we normally think about with retirement financially.
Social Security.
One is Social Security. Don't make it. Two.
Savings or pension?
Yeah. Pension would be kind of like Social Security, but specific to a particular situation. Yeah. Savings. Generally, I think people look at retirement as, do I have enough dollars sitting somewhere that if I pull 100 grand a year, is it going to last until I die? Yeah, that's a terrible way to look at retirement. You see the difference here. In this scenario, that person would need their net worth to be $2.25 million. Because if their net worth is $2.25 million and it's generating an 8% return a year, it's $180,000. What that means, this number in that scenario never actually moves. They have a net worth of 2.25, they're getting an 8% ROI on it every year, and then spending every dollar that it earned. But this number isn't depleting. Now, if you were really confident that you were going to actually spend $180,000, this would not be a good net worth to call it a day on your 9-to-5 job, because now you've got a lot of pressure on this. But precision at this point isn't the point. Starting to think about your goal as a net worth goal is the point. Andy, yeah.
I was just wondering, like, so that also doesn't take into consideration 2 to 3% inflation for every year after you turn 55? So I mean, that number's never gonna be enough. Like, it's not like that number's always gonna be low because you're looking at, 2 to 5%
Yes.
every single year that you plan to live after you turn 55, correct?
Okay, so there's a hedge to that. Yes, you're correct. Generally speaking, in periods of high inflation, this number goes up too.
Yeah.
The ability to quote unquote make money goes up. I say quote unquote because if inflation is going up, you may not be actually making wealth. But if inflation goes up at a high rate, all of a sudden, all of your assets are probably returning. Because if inflation's happening, let's say a big chunk of your net worth is in real estate. Your real estate's producing cash flow at 8%. Well, if inflation's really high, what's happening to the value of your real estate?
Going up.
Is escalating. So there is a little bit of a hedge to that, but Andy, I think what you're getting at is right, and then don't think about this as a static, one-time thing. It's more about, I'm thinking about my money as a function of net worth, and an ROI on that net worth that then can feed standard of living so that I can set a net worth goal based on it. I would actually suggest you should err on the side of caution with every one of these numbers. So to say, well, I don't think I'll need $200,000 to meet my standard of living, but I'm gonna use that as my calculation. And I think I can produce 9%, but I'm gonna use 7. So therefore, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that hedges the bets on that.
Budget.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then Mark, couldn't you also just say, because ideally, or depending on how you're invested or diversified, like you're gonna be hopefully paying off your house, so then those costs are potentially lower, and then the older you get, depending on how far your projection goes out, you're gonna spend less money the older you get.
Yeah.
Unless you spend, I mean, it all depends on how you spend it, but.
I think the question of like, okay, but a big chunk of my living expenses now are a mortgage, and that goes away someday. Yes, that comes into play. We're gonna get into this when we talk about leverage. Not suggesting any of you should do this, but just as an example of how a financial statement helps you to nuance that more, I don't think I'll ever pay off my mortgage. As long as I can borrow money on a 30-year amortization at significantly lower than I am producing on the money, I actually probably always borrow. So not saying anybody else needs to do that, but just the nuance of the return on your net worth takes into account so many different factors. But you might say, well, Mark, you appear to love risk. So I'm not comfortable having a mortgage, which means what I need to live on per year could be lower. Great. It's the advanced thinking about the formula that I want. I don't want to prescribe any of those numbers to anybody.
This is kind of over that question of like, what are you putting in your personal financial statement as net worth? What really is net worth, and why the home is not, and is not an asset because it can't pay you ROI in that event, which is, I feel like kind of nice to take this piece, but you kind of have to flip that back to the personal financial statement and then be like, what is the net worth that I'm calculating into this? Because fully owning my home doesn't mean that I'm getting paid money for it. Having a mortgage doesn't mean that I'm getting, it's like there's a very different, I could be land poor or land rich and cash poor and be very destitute at the age of 80 in that scenario.
And it's,
Maybe not just me, sorry.
again, thinking about it this way gives options. It doesn't prescribe what you would do, because everybody's gonna be in a different situation. But I think looking at it this way gives options, and that, like, unless something radical were to change for decades, the federal government has guaranteed that interest rates on owner-occupied mortgages are lower than the typical market forces are returning on capital investment. So when the market is doing really well, is when the federal government says, oh, we should probably increase rates. And they don't. Correct. What that means is you probably, the more kind of advanced you get into this, the more you're always going to be looking at your house as that's a key question. And so since I know, I will probably always leverage my house. My standard of living number probably never notably goes down, because to maintain that standard of living, I'm always gonna have a mortgage payment. So for me, I will probably always keep my house on my personal financial statement, but it doesn't actually show that much net worth,
Right.
because I always have a mortgage. I would be hesitant if you didn't have a mortgage on your primary residence and you never intended to leverage it, I would say take it off of your personal financial statement. Because then you're showing this really big piece of net worth that can't produce income. Whereas if you borrow against it, that debt is eliminating a lot of the net worth. But now we're just talking about accounting.
Okay.
I do think it's a good idea, is be consistent. Like, if you're using your house on your personal financial statement now, no problem. Keep it on there then. Because one of the things that I'm gonna encourage you to do is to monitor this over time. How much per year am I able to increase my net worth? So mine now goes back 12 years. I can look at the percentage of increase in net worth. How is I performing relative to what I projected? And as long as my house is always in there, I'm getting good information from it. But also, it's a great question. I would be cautious if somebody said, this is my goal, and oh, by the way, my house is worth 2.1, and my plan is to pay it off. So you're gonna be working for a long time. Great question. Somebody else had their hand up. Will there be any family tomorrow? It'd be really funny if somebody in the room was like, why did you use me as your example? I was not using someone as an example. So, a couple things to consider adding in as you look at the standard living. You realize this is basically like what your net worth can like print off a year in value. You may want to consider like, okay, do I have kids? Are they later in life? What am I going to want to do for them? It's not just what are my bills. You might have a desire to increase in generosity and be very giving to organizations or community or neighbors that you care about. We talked about inflation or like increasing cost of living. Those two kind of go hand in hand. Maybe you build in a buffer there to make sure you're not shorting yourself on the dollar per year. Medical or other increased costs. This is like all on the other side of the what about if I pay off my mortgage question. But I want everybody to have these three numbers. What year do I want to be able to stop working? How much do I think I would need per year to be okay? And then what rate do I think I can have my net worth passively returning money? You might think, boy, I'm way off on these, I don't even know what I'm doing. Start somewhere. It's amazing what happens when you change the way you think. Over time, it really has impact on how you behave. And by the way, I think this is a good illustration of the, like, this isn't just about getting filthy rich. What if the number is $40,000 a year? And they're like, there's so many things I want to do in life that I can't do if I have to work. And I want clarity as to when I can do them and how. Fantastic. This will help you do it. another little disclaimer. Retirement specialists, financial advisors, very worthwhile. Like, I'm not, goodness, do not let me replace them in your life. I don't have a financial advisor. Maybe more accurate would be to say I have like 20. I don't particularly have a financial advisor. I can guarantee you that a relationship with a CPA is worth it to you as a realtor. It's just a question of who and when. CPA for sure. Financial advisor, I actually could go either way. I think because of what we do for a living, you're gonna get the luxury of disposable income and really good access to good investment opportunities. So just as an example, physicians, I just used that example earlier. If any of you were a doctor and you said to me, look, I'm gonna be a doctor for the next 20 years, should I have a financial advisor? I'd say, yeah, you should have a financial advisor. Because you're gonna make a ton of money, most likely. And it isn't, you're not making money by learning about how to use money or by learning about how to make money. You're making money because you have a very valuable specific skill. You need to find somebody to help you manage it. That very well could be true for all of you too. But I would say this should complement. Like, your financial advisor should not replace this. You should be in control. You should be the one starting it, in control of it. And then if you want to have a relationship with a financial advisor and that's helpful, fantastic. I bet a financial advisor would make their day. If somebody comes in and says, I'm done working by the time I'm 55, I think I'll need $180,000 a year, and I can passively produce 8% ROI, I need to be worth 2.25. You want to punch some holes in that or figure out how to help me get there? And the financial advisor's like, oh my gosh, my ability to help you isn't less. It's actually probably more. Like, we can skip past the basics, and now I can get really specific into, okay, why 180? Or why 8%? Or, so putting that out there to say, hopefully none of you are like, oh, sweet, I don't have to have a financial advisor or a retirement person. I think this likely increases the value of having a person like that in your life.
Mark?
Yeah, Tanya.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick that I think the CPA portion is so great because when we think about how we maximize our money, and a CPA will be directing you to make sure that, do you have an HSA? Have you maxed out an IRA and a Roth? And a financial advisor might, but your tax person is in it and knows your finances so well that they can give you some different course corrections that I don't think your financial advisor would be able to give on that broad of a spectrum. But both might be an option for some folks, but the CPA is huge.
Yeah, the CPA is kind of a necessity for your line of work. The financial advisor is maybe more particular to how active are you in the management of your money, and yeah, there's lots of other things to consider. Yeah, Jenny.
I mean, I don't know how you get the 2.2 to maybe 8%. If like some of your net worth is lots, or some of your net worth is like in your home, like how do you get that 8% return? Is that another class?
No. Well, yeah, it is. Well, we are going to talk about investing in real estate tomorrow. But, okay, this is a good example. This is why doing your financial statements once a year is worthwhile. And Ryan asked, how scared were you to spend the night? The more in tune you are with your financial statement, the better. Because let's say a big chunk of this is tied up in non-income producing real estate. It's in land. I don't know what chunk, let's say it's $1 million for 2.25, that's pretty high, right? I would be doing probably once a quarter. I'd be doing a checkup of what that land is worth. Whether I had to pull money out of the land was a totally separate question. So over time, as long as the land is increasing in value, it is increasing my net worth. So you are able to track how your net worth is returning to you, but don't get stuck in thinking about it has to be returning to you in cash. Y'all follow that? If you own a piece of land that's worth $20,000, and a year later it's worth $30,000, you made $10,000. You do not have to sell the land to make the $10,000. You've made it. You have to sell the land to liquidate and have the cash sitting in your hands. That's a different decision. So this just tries to simplify it and say, can your net worth increase at that particular rate per year and provide you enough liquidity? Liquidity meaning like being able to pull cash. You'll need cash to live. I mean, a lot of people later in life might do this. This is one of the reasons people mortgage their house, for example. They've already paid it off. They're like, oh my gosh, my investments are all doing really well. Why would I liquidate those? I'll just borrow. We'll talk tomorrow about this is when you own a bunch of stocks. Whereas in stocks, the formula is pretty simple. There's only one way to get liquidity from a stock. What is it?
Sell.
Right. You realize there's more than one way to get liquidity from real estate. Just two. And I know, like, trust me, I remember the first couple times I worked on this spreadsheet where I had to like, okay, well next year I'm 25. I'm gonna guess the age is, I think the first year I did it was 40. I'm 40 now. I was wrong. But I attempted to calculate, what do I think I'll want my standard of living to be, and what do I think it can return, and I've gone back to it every year. And now, I'm far from an expert, but I know a lot more than I did then. And so the data is even, the sheet is more valuable to me now because I understand it better. And my ability to say, okay, what's liquidity and what's investment, like, you don't have to get all of that now. Start the sheet, have the personal financial statement, and then determine at what age in life do I want to not work anymore, or do I want to be able to not work, and what do I need my standard of living to be, and what percent do I think it can return. And now, you see, you could map out, if it's a decade, so okay, well, now I know what my net worth is now. At what percent does my net worth have to grow to hit, in this case, 2.25 in 10 years? And then you can start to compare. But all that's like a little bit more advanced. You see like one step at a time. And I think the more that you do this and the more that you try to shape your thinking in this way, the more value you're going to get in having conversations with other people, comparing notes, learning from them. I love it. The reason I love it, legit, mentor of mine in Lafayette changed my life. Hard stop. In a way that I'm incredibly grateful for. He had no reason to do that other than somebody did it for him, and he used it as a responsibility and an opportunity for him to do that for other people. I love it. Several of you from last year's class have met with me multiple times at your initiative, going over your personal financial statements. I love it. I'm not going to be the answer. Like, I'm not that smart. But I think I can be helpful, and you're going to be helpful to other people in your life, and you're going to find other people that are helpful to you. I think it's a shift in the way of thinking, and when you start creating these goals, reading the books, it compounds on itself. And if I could be a helpful resource, like you got it, I really genuinely enjoy talking about it. Whether it's helpful or not, it's just up to you to decide. But the decision to move, I think I talk about this tomorrow. Some of you have heard me talk about the trajectory, not position. This is a concept that I always find really helpful. I don't care about where you are now, and you shouldn't either, because you can't change it. Your understanding is where it is. Your level of education on this, or familiarity, your net worth, all of that today, you can't change. It is what it is today. You can change the trajectory. What direction am I heading? And so I think that gets at try it. Try the personal financial statement. Try the net worth goal. Try to figure out how the two of them connect. Don't worry so much about I don't think I totally understand how this works. You will, if you commit to the trajectory. Questions before I move on to tax strategy as our final example of Business 201. Okay. Shoot. I'm doing the bonus question. Go ahead, Joel.
I kind of piggyback off what Jimmy was saying within investment properties, as you look at returns in a certain, farther out period of time. It's really hard to calculate that, because your two questions are, do you cash out and then invest that somewhere else for a return, or do you live on the rent? And hypothetically, that could be much more than 8% and could increase depending on what debts you have remaining. So that's kind of, I think that's hard for me to estimate
Yeah.
so far out, because there's so many variables, it feels like. And capital expenses and.
There are a lot, and tomorrow's first lesson is the 5 ways that you make money by owning real estate. There are 5 ones, not 1, not 2, there's 5, at least 5. And I think you're getting at the kind of nuance between the 5 and having to try to measure which one of these 5 am I going for, or which multiple of them, and when. But yeah, we'll talk about that quite a bit. When do you sell? Why do you sell? Generally speaking, the wealthiest people in the world have become the wealthiest people in the world by owning real estate and not selling it. So that's a little spoiler there. Okay, bonus question. What is the single greatest expense you will have in your business over the course of your career? Did you say taxes, Chrissy?
Yeah.
I know, I said before we talk about tax strategy, it's a terrible place to put that question. Don't fly as far as they feel like I'm going to throw them. Yeah, it's not even close. Taxes. To finish with 30 minutes on taxes is a good way to lose some of you, but consider this. Quite a few people in this room, over the course of your career, you're going to spend over $1 million in taxes. There's a couple of you in the room that might spend $3 or $4 million not a cure. Congratulations. If you look at it like that, and you understand that you are not powerless in this, you see that's how big of a deal it becomes. Don't look at taxes as if they're just a given. I mean, having them is a given, but you're not powerless to have a really good tax strategy as a business owner. You are a business owner. Yeah, sorry, I answered that. The answer is yes. Okay, so tax strategy starts with the understanding the difference between income and net worth. So I already kind of went through this example. Follow me on this? Think about it. I earned earned 100, and probably spent 90. How did my net worth grow by something more than 10? Someone explain it to me.
You bought an asset. I was like,
When did I buy the asset?
the last day of the year.
Yeah, Tricia said your assets increased. Yes, that's basically what happened. I would actually say that the word income, like, it's almost like you have to define it. What do you mean by income? You mean how much money funneled into your checking account per year? Or do you mean, what was your net worth at the start of the year, and what was your net worth at the end of the year? Okay? I'm just trying to make it real by saying, like, the first time this happened, I've kind of been like trying to get to this point for a while, but do you see the tax implications of this? What does a person making $100,000 a year pay in taxes?
A lot less than someone.
Tell me, I mean, roughly speaking, I'm asking, how many kids you have? 30 grand, maybe, right? If I had as many kids as Sarah Beth says that I have, I'd probably pay zero. But, how much is somebody making $250,000 a year pay in taxes? If it's all income?
13,000.
50. No,
More than 50.
more than 50, sorry,
More than
75,
50.
75.
More than 75. Yep.
Oh, it puts you into a different tax bracket.
Somebody who, if you're, I've been using the example,
75, 50.
if you're a physician that has an annual salary from IU Health for $250,000, if you don't have a tax strategy or depreciation somewhere, you'll pay over $100,000 in taxes. $100,000 versus $30,000. That's a legitimate one-year difference. Okay? How much effort do most people go through to make $70,000? Yes, they do. So I'm trying to convince you to buy into a lifelong tax strategy being a huge deal. Yes, it is a bigger deal the more money you make. But you gotta start somewhere, okay? And as realtors, I joked about it earlier with the IRS, we're an industry that, a lot of people in our industry make good money and have no tax strategy. They're not depreciating that. I have open conversations with people about this, and they write that check in April. And they do that once, and then the IRS makes them do quarterly estimates, or they have set an S corp, they do withholdings. Like, it's not about how you pay it. I'm not saying, I said this earlier, I'm not talking about strategy and like save up for it. Yes, do that. I'm talking about legally minimizing the actual tax burden. The realtors aren't very good at this. Generally speaking, they're not very good at it. Okay.
I like your boxes.
Few notes on tax laws. I'm gonna say this twice. It's absolutely not worth it or ethical to violate the tax code. It's a bad idea. It is absolutely not worth it or ethical to violate the tax code. It's a bad idea. That's not at all what I'm talking about. And two, okay, I'm just gonna say that again in reverse. There's stack hands that we're only talking about things that are 100% legal. Okay. I want to make a comment here that I'm pretty sure nobody in this room had any meaningful influence on what the tax code is and what the laws say. And I am not trying to comment here on whether I like the way that they're written. Because if I did comment on that, I would say that tax laws are clearly written in the favor of people that have a lot of money and own a lot of real estate. conversation. You have to decide, judging some significant change in life, my hunch is that none of us are gonna have a whole lot of influence on what the tax code is gonna be for the rest of your life. If and when you do, great, and for whatever reason you want my opinion, I'll give it to you. But you're a part of a system that has a tax code that is favorable to people that have money and own real estate and have figured out how to generate wealth through what's called capital gain rather than through what's called regular income. The vast majority of the people in the United States do not have capital gain, they have regular income. They are paid money to provide a service. And they have to pay taxes on it. I wish it wasn't the way that it is, but my philosophy on this is my decision is, do I legally keep as much of it in my hands as I can, or do I send it to Washington? Like, that's really what it comes down to. And if you're gonna ask me, we could get into this, I can't actually. In a different setting, we could, and I'm happy to. If somebody said, if this room of people over the next 20 years develops a really great tax strategy and keeps more money in their pockets, do I think that leads to better and more equitable outcomes in the city of Indianapolis than had they paid those taxes? My personal philosophy is that yes, it does. I'd rather have it in your pockets because I think particularly if it was very strategic, if you want to be generous and equitable with it, fantastic. That's a great reason to have a tax strategy. Better tax strategy, you can get more money away. Awesome. Okay? Yeah, it's almost like the people that have written our tax laws for now hundreds of years happen to own a bunch of real estate. Okay, I already said that. I talked about this earlier. We're gonna skip that. I think it's the fourth time I've said I don't want to leave you.
Just so you know, I did plan on leaving at 4:30, but I'm not going now, so. Not only did you I have already rescheduled. I'm
Here, I think if there's two spots where I think we're most at risk of people being like, whoa, I'm gone. It's tax strategy and when we talk about leverage tomorrow, debt. Those are the two where it can get kind of math heavy. You don't have to get all this for it to be worthwhile. Try to stay in tune, and if you walk away thinking, okay, I need to better understand tax strategy, great. Yeah, it's not over your head. Again, when this was first kind of taught to me, I wasn't even paying income tax. Follow that? No, I didn't make enough money. I wasn't paying any, I paid income tax out, I had withholdings come out of my check, and then what happened in April? I'd get it back. At that point in time, income tax strategy was meaningless, but my mentor said, okay, you can pretend that it's gonna be meaningless for the rest of your life, or you can start to think about it now. You have to start somewhere, I've said that multiple times. Okay, the commitment to make the personal financial statement and the goal sheet. I would love for as many of you as choose to do this, I would love at some point in this next year to go over it with you. And I just want to emphasize here, this is the starting point of a tax strategy. Okay, this gets at what Ryan asked me earlier. How is it that you're comfortable spending 90% of what your tax return says that you make in a year? That seems foolish. The way that you can do that wisely is a really good understanding of your personal financial statement. goals are with your net worth on your personal financial statement. And as a realtor, again, coming back to this, right now, I'm just still trying to convince you that it's a good idea. If you're successful, you're gonna have a year where you pay a tax bill and you're like,
Ouchie.
oh, I do not wanna do that again. So are you prepared to be able to enact a tax strategy that if you didn't understand your personal financial statement well, is gonna scare you? Okay? Because oftentimes it involves investing money or being tight on cash at certain points in time. Like, it comes with, like, disciplines you have to enact. But again, committing to the personal financial statement and the goal sheet, tell me about the goal sheet, that what my net worth would be at a certain time and how do I get there. If you have both of those things and you're willing to come ask me or anybody else to go over them with you, this is gonna put you well on your way to tax strategy. Okay, now, the like, what of your tax strategy? Because okay, Mark, I get it, it's important. How do I do that? Here's where I'm gonna say, some of you might develop multiple means to like legally minimize your tax burden. But this is one reason why, like, establish a good relationship with a CPA. This is number one. CPAs they don't just exist to keep you compliant or to save you some time with your tax return. Over time, they can help you legally minimize your tax burden. In a lot of other industries, you're gonna have different, like you're gonna see people doing different things to minimize their tax burden. But spoiler alert for tomorrow, oh yeah, sorry, I already talked about that. We're gonna do a Q&A, but this is why we're gonna spend so much time on investing in real estate. Because if somebody's asking for my advice, they say, I'm a realtor, or I'm in this business, and I think I'm gonna be able to make pretty good income, then I'm gonna have to pay $1 million plus over the course of my career in taxes. What should my tax strategy be? Well, the first thing I'm gonna say is, okay, show me your financials. Do you have a really good personal financial statement? Do you have a net worth goal? Are you thinking about money the right way? If all that's true, I'm gonna say, well, there's a bunch of things you can legally do to minimize your tax burden, but none of them compare with owning real estate. My suggestion to realtors is that is your tax strategy. And it's one of the reasons why it blows my mind that I know so many realtors who've made a lot of money that don't own any investment real estate. It could sound like I'm shaming somebody into owning investment real estate. I'm not saying that you should from that sense. I'm saying people understand how costly taxes are, and they don't understand how impactful owning real estate can be to legally minimizing that tax burden, and you're in the industry. Like, that's yes, a physician can take advantage of owning real estate to minimize their tax burden in every way that you can. What's the big difference? They have no, well, maybe they do. They don't necessarily have any expertise or streamlined access to owning real estate. If you understand the importance of tax strategy and understand how owning real estate will legally minimize your tax burden over the course of your career, if you understand both of those things and you choose not to do it, awesome. I mean it. That's your decision. Eyes wide open, you choose not to do it, great. I don't view my job as convincing you to do it. I view my job as opening your eyes to what the true decade or multiple decade long impact of taxes is, and that you have a vehicle at your fingertips to use as tax strategy. And this is one of the things that business owners do that salespeople don't. something from today that you're like, okay, this makes total sense to me, or something from today that you're thinking, I still am trying to get my arms around this concept? Yeah.
I will say, not just today, but so last year when you did this, I was cringing because I don't believe in that at all. So your gung ho approach to just getting it up everywhere just breaks me out of the mud. So I'm not an extremist. It's a crystal word. But no, seriously, I was like, I can't do all of this right now. But what I did walk away was, I'm okay with real estate debt. And I was like, what's the one thing I could take away? And that was that. So I'm happy today, instead of waiting to buy investment properties all in cash, I did. I can't even say it. I borrowed money. It was a big deal. And so I'm excited. And so now I'm like, what's two things I can take away this time? So if I would encourage anyone, it's a lot of information, but luckily you do this every year, and like just at least taking one or two things and then just keep moving forward, because that was a big deal for me, and so, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it, is that you're never gonna understand everything that you don't understand in one moment. Can you increase what you understand? Back to that circle illustration, can you grow just a little bit? And say, okay, what are my action items to move in that direction? When I hear about share this about when you asked me about that.
Go ahead, and then I can tell you what my wife said in the text I sent.
Ryan said, okay, we're thinking about buying an investment property or just accelerating the payoff of our mortgage, and my wife hates debt, what should I do? I was like, oh, that's right, I don't know if I want to go into that. But I do think this is why these spreadsheets, if you hate spreadsheets, like, you know people that can help you. It's why the spreadsheets are so impactful. As I said, it's one thing to look at debt out of fear. Typically don't make good decisions out of fear. It's another thing to look at debt with an eye to, like, shrinking risk. Shrinking risk, if somebody were to say to me, I've run spreadsheets, I can tell you the different projected outcomes of buying rental property and putting debt on them, or accelerating the payoff of my mortgage. I ran them both out for 10 years. I know the different outcomes. And I know that buying rentals will increase my net worth by $100,000 over that 10 years. But I'm not comfortable with the risk profile, so I'm not going to do it. Awesome. See what I'm saying there? That isn't like a philosophical or fear-based aversion to debt. That is I looked at the numbers and I understood what I was saying no to. And you have to kind of work with that. So like taking that next, like, I will investigate this. I will build the spreadsheet, and it's going to have 5 errors on it. And I'm going to ask multiple people to look at it with me and help me understand it more. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. So. Rosie.
Okay, this is not a question so much as a comment, but I approached Mark like about 2.5 years ago and asked him to teach me about money. And I started sending him a personal financial statement once a quarter. I was that person that said, like, this is going to be super negative when I start, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to start. This is very
What else that we've covered today are like, I get that, it's clear, or maybe something where you're like, I still don't think I get.
8% off your net worth, that's still not quite there.
Yeah, in terms of how do you do that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan said 8% off of your net worth, like, how do you do that? Real estate's a very good way. Like, again, I said it earlier, there is a reason that the majority of the wealthiest people in the world have made their money owning real estate. For all the attention that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, for all the attention that they all get, you look historically, or right now, look at a list of the 1,000 wealthiest people in the world and how they made their money. The tech entrepreneur they basically don't exist on the list. It's all real estate. What do you think Jeff Bezos is doing with all his money? He owns a ton of real estate. The Walton family, the Walmart. Have you guys seen the documentary on the McDonald's founder? Those in business school, I remember case studies on those I thought were so interesting. The professor was basically making the argument that those were both real estate companies. And they are. They totally are. All that to say, Ryan, I think the primary means that you will have to generate a passive return off of net worth is likely going to be somewhere in the realm of real estate. Partially because you're in the real estate industry, you have expertise, but also partially because that's the most precedented means to do it that's ever existed. Now, a 401k is not a bad idea. I have a 401k, I have money in my 401k, I'm not banking on it. But 401ks typically produce positive. You can end up with an opportunity to buy interest in a small business, or you can be a passive owner. You could do other sorts of deals with people, but I look at it like, why try to reinvent the wheel when the most precedented means to do that happens to be an industry I'm already in.
Mark, didn't you say you expect real estate prices in general to go up 15% next year?
Well, they have the last 2 years, 15% year over year. I think they're actually going up faster than 15%
So
right
you're
now.
just doing nothing with the real estate.
Right. Now, if you do nothing with the real estate and you're just simply holding it, and it's going up 15%, my hunch is that inflation's happening. But, yeah,
My
Tanya.
big takeaway is kind of opposite of Rosie's. I'm 49, I'm not scared to share that, and I've been investing in some shape or form since I was 16. And so for me, I'm comfortable, but I'm like, I need to add more risk into my life. Like, why are we not doing this? And now that I've gotten into real estate, I see some of these properties that we have bought for $1,500 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And at any point in your life, it's going to be some sort of risk, so figuring out what the payoff is in the long term. And so, Rosie, thank you for saying that, because I need to do the same thing. I've got a different idea, but I need to reevaluate it.
Yeah, risk aversion can be healthy. Spreadsheets have a way of clarifying what is sound financial principle and what is fear.
Yep.
Yeah. I want to hang out for a few minutes if anybody wants to chat. Thank you so much for coming. Remember that it's not noon tomorrow.